Welcome, members. We're going to have a very full board meeting this evening. However, before we start the meeting, I'd like to say a few words about what has happened and transpired over the last almost 8 months now. As you all know, we've taken over as a resident board as of the 1st of January of 2020. At that time, our highest priority was to verify and validate that all of the documents that this community were supposed to get from Taylor Morrison actually came here, and it's been verified by a number of people, and everyone around this room had a chance and participated in that process. Shout out to Krish and his financial people for all those financial documents, and of course Dick and his infrastructure group did a phenomenal job, because the majority of the documents are engineering intent, so that process took about a month and a half. From there, we made a critical decision to change our community manager from Pope to Icon Management, and we're very happy about that. However, when we made that determination, it took another 90 days, because the Pope contract says we had to give them 90 days in transition before Icon would be on property, and they took over on the 1st of June. Between that meeting in early March, we all have had to deal with the challenge of the coronavirus. The board, along with all the volunteers in the community and working with the state and county to determine what was the safest protocols, and we've been following them. And as time goes on, we've modified where we can. I would like to announce that future board meetings, probably starting in September, we hope to be able to have limited audience or member participation into our live set, as well as we'll continue to stream. So we want to be able to have folks here and do it very safely. It'd be either here or the church, but we are considering, and Tessa, our CAM, is going to be working to determine when that could occur. Tonight is the first of 3 board meetings in the next 3 weeks. We have one tonight. You'll get a notice that we'll have one on next coming Monday. And then early or mid-September will be a third one. We've been working on a lot of projects, a lot of document clearing, and tonight is a very large meeting, because we have worked diligently for over a year and a half in regards to Taylor Morrison, and coming to a point where we believe we can move forward. With that, I will let Tessa start the meeting.
Thank you, Steve. Okay, well, with that said, we will go ahead. We'll call the meeting to order. It is 6:04 p.m. We do have a quorum of the directors present at tonight's meeting, and the proof of notice was posted in accordance with Florida Statute 720 on the property, as well as sent via email. Our first order of business is the new business to discuss the Taylor Morrison settlement agreement and the infrastructure update. And I believe, Steve, you're going to start us off with that?
Yes, Tessa.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, to start us off, let's talk about what is our desired results today in regards to the Taylor Morrison agreement. First of all, we want to share background and history leading up to the settlement agreement. We want to provide high-level view of TM offer, financial settlement, and agreement conditions. We want to share how the settlement funds will be utilized, and we want to obtain board approval for the proposed TM settlement agreement. And so with that, I will turn it over to Sandy.
Thank you, Steve. Good evening, everyone. Welcome. So what I'll do is spend a few minutes talking about the proposed Taylor Morrison settlement, what it includes, and also give you a little bit of background and information that led us up to this point. For the first piece of the settlement, there are two pieces. The first is the 2019 deficit funding. And prior to the transition, the developer chose to fund the HOA deficit arising from association revenue minus expenses versus paying an assessment on all the unsold lots and unclosed lots. And Taylor Morrison historically paid the HOA the final annual deficit funding payment after the financial audit is completed, with interim payments made to manage the cash flow as we needed it throughout the year. So TM was funding the working capital requirements for our operations as needed. So that's part one, the deficit funding from 2019. Part two is the funds to repair alleged construction defects in HOA common assets. So I'll get into that on the next slide, please. So to give you some background on first starting with the developer deficiencies, in the second quarter of 2019, prior to the transition, the Operations Transition Group, better known as the OTG, had developed a developer deficiency list which included a lot of items that were submitted by the various homeowner groups. There was really no clear guidance as to what should be considered or what was defined as a deficiency. So it sort of led to what we call a wish list. So it was everything that we hoped and we wanted for Taylor Morrison to improve or complete or repair prior to the turnover. The settlement, however, was only for alleged construction defects in our common assets, or the proposal is only for those assets. In quarter three of 2019, Taylor Morrison commenced to fix several items on the list after it was shared with them from the OTG. In quarter four, TM was no longer actively working on the repairs on the list. They ceased working on the remaining deficiency list, and when requested to respond, Taylor Morrison indicated that they would only negotiate with the elected board after the turnover in January. So that led us to quarter four. They began to start to repair one of our biggest items on the deficiency list, which was the drainage issues on approximately 1.5 miles of our roadways. However, they didn't continue to work on the remaining items on the repair list. So we can go to the next slide. After the transition, the board proactively researched, identified, and held some preliminary conversations with a legal firm which specializes in Florida real estate law and construction, and specifically as it relates to HOA turnover, consulting, and claims. And that is Tannenbaum Scrow. And they were also recommended by our HOA counsel, Stephen Thompson. Tannenbaum requested that the HOA perform a forensic engineering study as well as a financial study. And that was before they would engage and participate in any sort of claims negotiations. So at that time, the estimated cost was over $250,000, and that didn't include legal fees. So the board made the decision to delay this spending and use Tannenbaum for consulting services, which is exactly what we did. So that's the piece on the deficiency items. And the next piece is the deficit funding. So a little background on the deficit funding. The finance group in November of 2019 requested from Taylor Morrison the timing of when they expected to pay the association and transfer the funds that they owed us for this deficit funding. Taylor Morrison stated that they will follow their historical approach, which was essentially to make the payment only after the audit was completed. So in April of 2020, the board received the draft audit report confirming that Taylor Morrison owes the association $568,063. That was confirmed in May with the final audit report that that Taylor Morrison did in fact owe the association $568,063. And at that time, the board formally requested that Taylor Morrison make that payment to the HOA. After that request was made, we received no satisfactory response to our request, so the board escalated our request to higher levels of Taylor Morrison and essentially reached the president of Taylor Morrison, Florida. And that was in late May. In late May, we received a response to our 2019 deficit funding request, and the board received an unsolicited holistic settlement from Taylor Morrison, which included the deficit funding of $568,063, as well as an amount for the alleged construction defects. So that's the background and information as to how we got to where we are today. And so now I'm going to turn it over to Krish for him to walk through more of the details on the settlement negotiations as well as the settlement itself. So Krish?
Thank you, Sandy. If those of you that are listening, if I'm not coming clear because of the mask, please let me know. I'll at least, take it off if that's required. But if you can hear me, I'll want to continue this fashion. You know me, so I can't sit and talk at the same time. So I got to be standing up and kind of walking around. I'm sorry about that. But to build on exactly what Sandy has stated, all our focus initially was to get the 2019 deficit funding from Taylor Morrison. That's what our focus was on. And all we were pushing from Taylor Morrison is, please pay us that amount, because you owe us that as part of the Florida statutes. And why are you delaying it? That was our focus. It was surprised when we got the response back when we reached out to the president of Florida, of Taylor Morrison. Actually, we got an entire agreement signed by one party and said, here is if you sign the other side, we are done, kind of a thing. That's essentially how it came. And to our surprise, it included both the 2019 deficit funding and also their first proposal for payment for what they called alleged construction defects. And they used that specific term to the whole thing. It's alleged construction defects. So when we saw the agreement, we said, we discussed internally quite a bit. And then we said, let's go talk to them. Let's understand, what are they proposing and what's the basis for their proposal to understand. So basically, we kind of said, let's sit down and understand for both of our needs. And that's essentially what we did because of the COVID stuff. It was done as a teleconference with them. And their senior management was present. And several of the board members were present from our side. One of the things we took away from that discussion, there are a couple of points TM was insisting on. And I want you to be clear with that. They were insisting on that it'll be a comprehensive settlement, that we would not just settle the 2019 deficit fund payment, or we don't want to settle only the construction defects. We want to settle both of them together, okay? And we kind of had some understanding of why they want to do that, but fine, as long as it doesn't take a long time, there was nothing wrong in waiting for a month or two to kind of settle the whole thing if you can do it. So that was the background that we got. And really, when we looked at the agreement, and also Taylor Morrison insisted, listen, we will only settle with you for what they defined as a construction defect. They looked at our list of what we call developer deficiencies, and they said, we're not going through all of them. We're just going to look at construction defects, was the entire conversation. So the board felt the initial offer was inadequate, And we haven't done enough work to kind of go in and say, what are the construction defects out of all the developer deficiency list we have, and how do we put all of that together? So we really said we have to do additional due diligence. That is basically what we concluded after the meeting. And then it took us several months in this process after that. So the first thing the board did, which was critical in this process, was remember the specialist attorney for transitions and claims that was mentioned by Sandra. We reached out to Tannenbaum and Scrow. We proactively sought their input and said, please look at all the items that we have on our deficiency list and tell us by each item what is the legal success potential of that item if you go into a legal proceedings of any kind. So we wanted to get how strong our legal position is on each of those items, and how successful can we be if we do proceed to take legal action on those items. So Tannenbaum Scrow turned around and provided to us by each item, what is the potential for litigation success in that item. So we took that first set of data. Then we kind of went, as several board members, we reviewed all the successful legal cases in the last, I won't say 20 or 30 years, but in the last 5 years kind of a thing, for developers in Florida. How many homeowners associations have won legal cases, and what is the constant theme in them? What we clearly determined was that all the legal cases that were won, the client or the HOA clearly proved that it was a construction defect. And I'm using the term construction defect, and some of you homeowners who have a lot more knowledge are saying, why it's only construction? Under Florida law, construction defect could be in design, it could be in materials used, it could also be in the workmanship. All of them are combined into that single term called construction defect. Doesn't matter how the defect came. And proving that what we are claiming is a construction defect is what we found to be critical to go through the list of our deficiency list and find which ones they are. In addition, we really looked at the settlement cases that TM has lost in legal terms and says what was their susceptibility actually. Okay? And we found out they were susceptible for two areas. One was roads, which was not a surprise to us, for a lot of you. The other one was drainage. And it's partly roads, partly other stuff, drainage really. And I know several of you are aware of a case that a lot of you have talked about, that is the, Alaqua Lakes community, which is kind of suburb of Orlando, that has settled for their courts. Just want to give you a brief overview of what happened to them. That association turned over from the developer, which was TM, to the association in 2004. Okay? Size, in terms of roads, very similar to us. In terms of number of homes, a lot smaller, but the road size is very similar to us. And they found some issues with the roads. They got into legal discussions and filed a lawsuit because they could not come to an agreement in 2008. So it took them 4 years before they could even go for a lawsuit, actually. That tells you how much effort is involved in this process, actually, to do that. And then, finally, the case was settled. The jury award was given in 2018. So 10 years after the case was filed, 4 years to file the case. So you're talking of 14, 15 years if you want to go through the legal process to get a settlement. And they used a law firm called Business Trials Group, which they use what's called a contingency model. That means they don't take anything from the HOA, everything comes off the settlement. And as you all know, we would never know what they took away out of the settlement. Generally, you can ask our attorney, from my view is generally the attorney's take starts a minimum at 50 to 60% kind of level, and as high as 80% of the entire payments the attorneys will take away when they're funding it. So, but anyway, there is some mixed views on that, but it looks like the HOA got somewhere in the order of $3 to $3.5 million after the whole thing was done, okay? And we can't be sure of that number because you have to be on their board to know. It's their confidential information. I'm just giving that to you as a background in terms of one case sharing with you to give you a practical example of what it has taken for somebody to go through a legal approach. Then, actually, we've taken the list of all the, what we kind of call construction defects out of the deficiency list, and then performed a high-level risk assessment. So we superimposed all this information, actually. So the superimposition of the information is, what did Tannenbaum and Scrow tell about that item in terms of success of legally prosecuting it? Whether it's a construction defect, and then what was the risk associated with all this. So we kind of pulled all this together and pulled what we call a subset of the items in the deficiency list that we thought we can legally successfully prosecute, kind of a thing, based on all this information. And then over that, in essence, with the help of Dick Beller and the infrastructure group, we actually estimated costs for all these items. Some of them we got from some contractors. Some of them, there are a number of homeowners who live here, who do contract work, who have the understanding of what it is. And we got that information from them, and we put the cost together. So really a shout out to the infrastructure group for their help and support in this process here of putting the cost together. I hope it gives you, it's taken some time, but I hope it gives you a background and understanding what effort it took in doing all this. So if some of you have seen a lot of closed door meetings we had, some of this was towards this. This is something that we cannot kind of have a discussion in the open meeting about this. So that's what we've been doing to see what the numbers look like. So based on this, we came to an understanding of what the range should be for us to negotiate with. So the process.
Is the chat part turned on? It's not coming through, and I just got a text from Tina. She can't get it to come through on her screen either. Because I'm watching it here live, and it's not on my screen either.
It's on mine.
It's on mine. Okay.
Are you getting questions?
It must be a thing.
Yeah, I don't have any.
It's delayed, though. It's delayed coming up, that's for sure.
Thank you, Dick. So we have done all this work. Board formed a view, what should the range of funds be for a settlement, and then said, can we do it? So this whole process took us several months in this process to go through and come to an understanding, and several back and forth discussions with TM once we had that. So I just want you to get an understanding that we didn't take the first offer they made. They didn't take the first counter offer we made either. Okay? So as you know, this is a process that normally happens in terms of negotiations, and that's what we followed through. So with all that background, so let me tell you what the final offer they put, and we think it's fair and reasonable. Using the total cost estimates for repairing the construction defects, which have high litigation potential, that's how we use them, okay? We have reached an agreement with TM for the following amounts. The first is to repairing alleged construction defects is roughly 1.3 million, roughly 1.291 if you want to be, okay? That is for the construction defects. 2019 deficit funding falls out of the audit. There's no negotiation on that number. That's 568,000 roughly. And so the total settlement that TM has agreed to is $1.86 million. Okay? So that is the financial portion of the settlement. I just want to kind of let you make you think that through. That's what they have offered. Of this, really, the 568 is coming from last year's, what they due to us, and the 1.3 million roughly is for construction defects. So board, we spent a lot of time as we went through this process. The overwhelming view of the board members on the about financial settlement felt it's fair based on the construction defects approach. That's it, equitable, and it meets the HOA needs to fix the construction defects. That's one side of it. Is that the entire thing? No, there's a small, longer-term risk. There is a small, longer-term risk. You know, have we got everything? Is something going to pop out from someplace? Possible. Okay? Talk to all the experts to see what can pop out with the best understanding we have. We said, let's go with this because having the funds in our hand right now, we felt is more important than waiting for 14, 15 years to go through the legal approach. The time value of money here is significant when you're talking of 1.3 million. As you know, any decent investment will more than double in about less than 10 years, okay? So you're talking of big chunks of money when you talk of time value of money. And using the example I gave you, if it takes 14, 15 years to get the money, once you start the legal process, it's a long time to fix the construction defects that you already might have. And the one that all of you would think is, think of how you would all feel if you have to wait, unless we get a special assessments, to wait for 14 years to fix the defect in the culinary center. You know, I don't think it's really nice for anybody, not the community. So this is the settlement on one side of it. Let me take, what are the key conditions that are part of the agreement for you to receive the $1.86 million? The first condition is the $1.86 million should be paid to HOA within 5 business days after the agreement is signed by both parties. That's very quick. 5 business days, they have to drop the funds into our bank accounts. The second, the 1.291 million to be used only to repair construction defects. That means the ones we know right now, if some pop up along the way, we can use the funds for that. But that amount can be used only to repair construction defects. The $568,000 from last year's deficit funding can be used in any manner as decided by the board, by your board here, really. Okay? So that is from a financial point of view. Let me go into some of the conditions they have agreed to, which is near and dear to several of us. TM has to install the final layer of asphalt on all the streets where roads were repaired for underground drainage within 3 months after the agreement is signed. That means all the streets that we have, with several of you have been talking, when will they finish it? We have now a time limit on that, so they shouldn't cross no more than 3 months from the time the agreement is signed. They need to kind of resurface them. One other item again. So we have the Messina Loop, where construction activity is ongoing and temporarily halted, and they have to do the last layer of asphalt within 12 months. Within 12 months or less, of this agreement signing. Okay? So those are the conditions in terms of the roads, what needs to be completed. So for them to give us this money, here are the two conditions that we have to agree to. One was that the HOA releases Taylor Morrison from all damages and claims for any construction defects in the common areas. That's so I just want to emphasize this. This is only for common areas. It does not include individual home warranty issues that each of us might have versus TM. That doesn't include them. They're outside the scope of this agreement, and the agreement is only associated with the common areas or common assets of the association. And the second thing is that HOA has to indemnify Taylor Morrison for all claims by any of its members, with respect to what we settle, with respect to the common areas. They're saying, if any of you as members of the association want to take a legal action against Taylor Morrison, the association has to indemnify TM for that effort. So those are the two conditions, and we will let our attorney kind of say a few things with this, because in essence, the agreement was totally viewed and approved by our attorney, which, Mr. Stephen is here, and he will talk in a minute. Mr. Tannenbaum has reviewed the first portion of the agreement. So all these conditions we were talking of, he has reviewed them, and he was in alignment with those conditions. All Mr. Tannenbaum has not seen is the final settlement amount, okay, because of the requirements of where we are. That's something we did not want to go. The final settlement amount and the agreement that contained the final settlement amount was not shown to Mr. Tannenbaum, but Mr. Stephen Thompson has seen that. So that is the background in terms of the financial portion of the agreement, and also what are the key conditions. What I will do is, I will just here now give a chance for our HOA legal counsel to share his views and opinions, both about the agreement and what he feels in this whole process.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate that. My name is Stephen Thompson. Oh, sorry about that. I'm the attorney for the association. And to be honest with you, when I look at the documents and hear the presentation, I don't think, and I've done this for 30 years, I don't think I've worked with a board that has taken such a comprehensive approach to the settlement and the turnover. I think this board has just done an amazing job. When I first sat down with the board, I told the board that Florida law really does not favor HOAs in regard to turnovers or transitions. Many people are familiar with Condominium 718 provides statutory warranties for condominium associations. There is no statutory warranty that is provided to an HOA. In addition, there's some case law that came out relatively recently that basically said that there are no implied warranties for an HOA on their improvements. So that, to me, and that to every attorney, indicates that there's a tremendous legal burden for an HOA to overcome. And so, we talked, a little bit about litigation. And one of the problems with litigation, and I'm kind of talking against myself because I'd love to have a case go on for 10 or 12 years, but that certainly is not in the best interest of an HOA. And these cases do go on. You've got to come out with attorney fees, and that's just the beginning. You've got to get experts, and there's no certainty that you're going to prevail. You're assuming that you're going to win. Many times, these cases don't always end well for the association. So it is, I think, extremely important initially to attempt a settlement. If you can't do a settlement, I mean, by all means, there's always that option. But in Florida with an HOA, you really have to. And again, what this board has done is really negotiated, in my opinion, a very favorable settlement, reviewed all the aspects of the common areas, and come up with a good settlement. Again, as far as the board has the authority under the documents and under the nonprofit corporation statute to enter into such an agreement such as this. There is no requirement that this be brought to a vote. And that's another reason, with your documents, there's some quirkiness in the documents. And if we were to pursue a litigation, one of the potential problems is you would have to get unit owner approval for that. And if you weren't able to get that approval, there would be real problems. So that's another reason that I think provides another incentive for this board to really consider this settlement and release. And again, I've looked at the terms of the settlement and release, and I've been involved in a number of these, and I'm familiar with some of the other cases, and I know that this is probably one of the best settlements that I have come across in a number of years. So the board has done a really good job. What I always tell the board is you use your business judgment rule, and that's really what you look. And when I take a look at the presentation that was made by the board, this board of directors has implemented their business judgment, and I think it's really to the benefit of the entire community for a number of reasons to really approve this settlement and release. The other thing is, when you enter into these lawsuits, it also takes away the focus. Right now, you're focused on the community. We're going to get this over with. But if you have a lawsuit for the next 4 or 5 years, that's really what the board focuses on, as opposed to working for the betterment of the community. And too many times I see, the settlement, the litigation, all of a sudden the board is in paralysis because there's so much focus on this. So I think that's another important reason. You guys have got a great start here. This board has been unbelievable. I don't think you want to begin to get bogged down in the details of a settlement. There's an awful lot of other things to do. So, it meets, in my opinion, it meets the requirements of the documents and Florida law, and I recommend approval.
Thank you, Stephen. I think we're just going to move on before we open it up questions. Just want to share with you at high level how the funds are going to be utilized. Okay, for the next section of it, Alan is going to talk about how some of the funds are going to be utilized.
Thanks, Krish. So, as we said, there's two components. The first one was the deficit funding, which basically Taylor Morrison was giving us working capital as needed. Once they turned over, it was incumbent on us to pay all our bills. And we critically needed that working capital in order to do so, because we lost our bank account, so to speak. So we've been fortunate. We were able to manage without that settlement. And now what we'd like to do with that $568,000 it's free money, so to speak. There's no tax implications on it, and there's no restrictions on how we use it. So we've determined that we'd like to use about $500,000, almost all of it, for working capital. Put it aside for rainy days. This is a seasonal business, if you will. And should we need the money, we'll have it. We won't have to borrow to get it or make any special assessments to raise capital. And that's basically it. Once we start working on the 2021 budget process, these funds will be considered. Certainly, if we want to keep 500,000 aside, that still leaves 68,000 that would be available for us to include in our budget. So that's the first half, and now I'm going to turn it over to Bob Gruber, who will talk about the repair section.
Thank you, Ellen. Good evening, everybody. This is the final slide of the deck, by the way, because there's a lot of questions coming in, and I'm sure we'll be getting to those at some point here in the near future. A couple things, though. The important thing is Taylor Morrison, the payment from Taylor Morrison for the alleged construction defects will only be utilized solely for fixing construction defects. In other words, but within there we have some flexibility, but they are construction defects. And there's been a list developed of what these construction defects are. And I'm not going to go into them in detail because Dick Billers is going to give a presentation after this on some of the details of these. But you can see they're the ones that I would think most people are very familiar with some of the shortcomings that we all have seen here in the community. Roads, number one. The Culinary Center acoustics, everybody knows that needs worked on. Golf course, we have bunker drainage, erosion, and other drainages within the golf course that needs to be dealt with. Insufficient lighting at several locations, the Benito Court Gate, mailboxes, amenity center, parking lot, and the pickleball courts. Need additional refrigeration at the Bahama Bar and Culinary Center, and then several smaller projects. Now, this is any construction defects, as you saw earlier on in the presentation. I think Krish pointed it out. Any construction defects identified after these funds are exhausted will be addressed from the reserve funds. So we're accepting these funds. But as Krish and others have said, we've done an exhaustive search to say what could these be, and it's highly unlikely that there's going to be any kind of construction funds that could put us in a bad way there. They will also be maintained in a separate account and have board approval for the projects brought forth under this category. So we'll look at each project and we'll approve it as a board and move forward. General ledger accountings will be maintained, so we'll segregate these under a separate general ledger account. And finally, we do not consider the settlement income to be considered taxable if we use the $1.3 million as repair amount for capital purposes within a reasonable time frame. And we're getting some advice from some of the financial auditors on what that means. And I believe that concludes this presentation. Thank you.
Okay, for right now, I'm not sure exactly. Are we going to go to Dick, or are we going to take the questions first? How do you want to do this?
What I see, Tess, a lot of the questions, I might be able to answer a lot of the questions with this presentation.
I'd like to answer one question I've seen. There will be no commingling of funds. $568,000 is for deficit funding. That goes to the general accounts. A separate fund, as Bob just mentioned, goes directly to the construction defects account, which is almost $1.3 million. So there is no commingling of those accounts. That's one quick answer I wanted to give. Go ahead, Dick. Look at the bottom.
See.
Go ahead.
You want to put the presentation up? Yes, sir. Okay, Chris is working on getting it up on the screen for everybody. So, first of all, good evening to everybody. There are a lot of questions, and I've been kind of monitoring the questions on the feedback system here as they come in, and hopefully, as I go through the presentation, I'll be able to answer some of the questions. There may be a few that I don't cover here, but just bear with me, and as I go through these slides, hopefully some of those will get answered. Okay, Krish has it up. We're ready to go. You want to go to the second slide, Krish? We did a big infrastructure update for the community last fall. Some of you that were here hopefully tuned in and remembered it. For those of you that weren't here, we did a lot of key items. We covered a lot of key items last year. We knew at that time there were drainage issues on the golf course, around some of the homes. The golf course bunkers were looking in pretty poor condition. We had poor lighting around the community in various locations, around gates, mailboxes, and pickleball courts for sure. They're still dark this day. I don't know how people play over there at night, but hopefully we'll be able to take care of that for them.
Not well.
We had a lot of preventative maintenance issues. We knew we had pool equipment that was either broken or ready to go. We had HVAC issues. We had some failures of HVAC systems that we shouldn't have had failures already on. We were concerned about our irrigation pumps, our buildings in general, and then obviously we've already touched on roads. We knew there were road issues. Taylor Morrison came in and did some work, and I'll talk about that in a separate slide as we go along. You got flip, Krish? Okay. So what has been completed so far? There's been a pretty good evaluation of the golf course, and the evaluation actually is ongoing. It's continuing, but some of the things we've got a better handle on now. We've got a better handle on the drainage. There's actually been some work done on some of the legs of the main drain lines on hole number 1, 6, and 10. They've done some major flushing of those lines. The lines themselves actually were partially plugged with silt, probably some construction debris, and they've cleaned those out. There's been some noticeable improvement. We're going to give it time to see if that's all we have to do. If not, we may have to eventually upgrade some line sizes and some drain sizes, but for now, it's starting to look promising. We did some rework on the bunkers on number 6. When they dug into them, the bunker drain lines pretty much were plugged up with silt, sand, debris. They cleaned it all out. They put layers of sand back in the bunkers, and they appear to be working well, but I will tell you that is I won't say a temporary, it's a shorter term fix for that type of a bunker. Anybody that knows anything or has done any research on bunkers knows that we probably need liners in our bunkers longer term. So that's something that's being evaluated, what that cost will be down the road. For now, the short-term fix, being able to get into these bunkers with Mickey's crews and get these lines cleaned out and get them working again, it will be great for the condition of the course and the bunkers short term. Eric Hager, our new maintenance manager with Icon here, has done just a fantastic job going around the community, visiting individual homes, everybody that's talked about having drainage problems or sod problems around their home. Eric's been talking to people and looking at the issues, and he's come up with a pretty extensive plan that he wants to do. He's been working with the landscape team, but he's also pulled in some experts, and what we would consider experts, some people from the University of Florida, some other local vendors that have expertise, and then some expertise on site, even in the form of some of our residents that have expertise. It's all part of this working team. So Eric has a good handle on what we think the scope is that deals with drainage and sod issues around these homes, and there'll be more to come on that. There's going to be a plan put in place on how we're going to address that going forward. Preventative maintenance contracts, basically there were none. And starting early this year, the first one we put in place was the preventative maintenance program for the irrigation pumps, as vital as they are to our golf course and our community. So that's in place. We've got HVAC, refrigeration, new contract with a new pool vendor. We've had roof inspections done. just a whole lot of things that the infrastructure group has really worked on and been able to pass over to Eric, and Eric has taken the ball and run with all this information and got a lot of things in place for us. The second layer of asphalt was completed on all the roads except for Messina Loop, and that was for construction purposes. But then, as we all know, some of the roads had to be torn up again with the underdrain piping. So all those areas still need the second layer of asphalt, which Chris talked about in his presentation. With this agreement we have with Taylor Morrison now, that'll all be completed within a 3-month period. So we have a definitive date on that at this point. Next slide, Chris. So where are the key areas that we need to address? You know, the deficiency list that we did in the risk assessment that we put together and we did on the deficiency list, and I'll still call it the deficiency list because that's what it's been for me since last year. Somebody else may call them alleged defects, but it's a deficiency list for me. We, as a board, came up with what we felt are a prioritization list of those items, but then a lot of it was supported with the strategic planning group's survey that went out to the community that Sandy led, and really most of the feedback we got from that survey was in line with what the board felt were our top priorities. So it's all meshed together really well. Number one on our list was taking care of the acoustical issues at the Culinary Center. That's been a problem for us since the day it's been opened. Unfortunately, because of COVID, it hasn't been a highlighted issue here recently, but at some point in time, the COVID issues will go away and we'll pack the house again, and we're going to want to make sure that we have our problem taken care of. So the acoustical issue is number one. Golf course drainage, and again, I say number one and I'll say number two. We're going to work on all these, hopefully simultaneously, on a lot of these projects with the money we've received from Taylor Morrison. Golf course drainage, the bunker issues. Since we put our deficiency list together, one additional item that's come up that is maybe new to a lot of people that they haven't heard about, we've got some issues with the irrigation system itself on the golf course. Some of it was hardware, wiring, things like that, and some of it is software. Mickey and his crew's been working on it. The last word I got from Sandy was we think we're about 85% working now, so the problem may be a little smaller than we initially thought, which is a good thing, but we still have some issues there that have to be resolved. But anybody that's noticed that there's more heads watering the golf course at night, there's a reason for that. They've been working on it, and unfortunately our prior management team, as things went bad, it appears they were shutting things off and just letting them go. They weren't letting us know that there was anything wrong, and they weren't fixing anything. So there's been a lot of discovery type work on the golf course since Icon and Mickey and his crew have come in. Last year there was some erosion repairs around some of the ponds and the backyards of some of the residences leading over the hills to the ponds. We told Taylor Morrison at that time we didn't feel well, let me back up. We felt that the repair as initially presented to us was going to be adequate. The installation of what they did was not per the manufacturer's recommendations, and there still are a few small erosion issues that we're going to have to address. The good news is the sub-base that they put in and that they purchased is good. We're just going to have to lift up the sod and do some work under there around that matting that they put down. Big issue, especially when we have large crowds and catering going on at the Culinary Center, and we have large crowds at the Bahama Bar, is insufficient refrigeration. We're going to be able to take care of some additional refrigeration for the Culinary Center and the Bahama Bar. And for those of you that are used to seeing refrigeration trucks that we have to rent that are hanging out the backside of the Bahama or the Culinary Center, hopefully those will go away. Every time we had a big catering event or we had a large resident event or anything, we had to go out and rent additional refrigeration, and we want to get away from that, so that's going to go away. and we already talked about drainage and sod issues around the home. So that's some of our key areas right there. And one of the things you don't see on this slide are roads, and I'm going to talk about that here on its own slide because it's such a big issue. I wanted to dedicate a whole slide to it. Some other areas that we're going to try to address with the money we received are some of the what we consider safety sensitive areas around the site where people enter the community, especially the resident only gate on Benito. It's really dark out there at night. In fact, it's pitch black. To me, I don't want to have residents coming into the community, especially those that don't have a reader on their windshield, somebody that uses a card, having to pull up and stop, roll their window down in pitch black darkness outside of our gate to get in. It's just not a safe thing. So we want to provide some lighting around there. The mailbox areas in our community, for those of you that walk to your mail, especially in the wintertime after dark, it's really dark. In some of the areas, it's pretty much black. We have mailboxes in some of the areas that aren't around any homes at all. It's really dark, so it's a dangerous situation. And our amenity center parking lot, I think we all know that there's some lighting there, but overall it's inadequate. So we're going to have to do some additional lighting there to help that situation. Insufficient lighting at the pickleball courts is another one. We had a light meter that we did some measurements with, and it wasn't even close to any type of standard for nighttime court lighting. So look for some lighting work to be done at the pickleball courts. Some smaller stuff, amenity center card room floor. I know that's been an issue for a while. We're going to go ahead and get that taken care of. There's also some window issues in the amenity center. We've lost the seal on some of these windows, and they're starting to fog up. You got moisture between the panes, so we'll get that taken care of. And you know, we actually have a laundry list of things that were never really even on the deficiency list, but things that people would like to see taken care of. And depending on how effectively and efficiently we can use this pool of money that the board will manage, hopefully we'll get to a lot of those projects also. Some of the good things that we've seen already, when I say efficiently and effectively, I don't mean that we're going to mismanage the money. What I mean is there are some quotes that we have, and our quotes that we got, we made sure that they were not shy. They were healthy quotes. And what we're starting to find out is some of the monies that we allotted for some of these projects were overestimated, which is a good thing, which means we should have additional money available. The refrigeration is one, for example. We got an estimate for refrigeration from Pope of $90,000. And our new estimate for refrigeration from Icon, and it was Dwayne that got it for us, is somewhere in between $30,000 and $40,000. So we should have a pool of money, $50,000 just from the refrigeration. So I think you'll see some of that as we go along. There'll be some savings with some of that money. The next slide is roads, and I want to really explain this. I know we're getting a lot of questions on roads, and I know I'll even get some questions from the infrastructure group on this because, frankly, a lot of these things and all of the things that the board was doing behind doors, we weren't discussing with the public. We weren't discussing even with our groups. These are legal issues that were kept within the board, and we're talking about them now. So some of the things I'm going to talk about, even my own infrastructure group hasn't heard about. But what I will say is they did a heck of a job up front in helping develop and make the deficiency list as robust as it is, and helping with a lot of the estimates that we had. We want to keep separate accounting for the road money. Part of the TM settlement, there was a big chunk of money that was in there for roads, approximately $500,000. And to some that sounds like a lot of money, and to some it sounds like it's not enough. And I want to explain to you why we think it's going to be enough. Currently, the reserve for just resurfacing our roads in the out years, we have estimated at about $1.6 million. So when you combine that with the $500,000 that we're getting from TM now, at some point in time, we're going to have over a $2 million pool of money to be used towards roads. The estimates that we have for putting under drain piping in and resurfacing the roads, just exactly like Taylor Morrison did, is about $420,000 per mile. So Taylor Morrison has done a little over 1.5 miles. We have maybe 6.5 miles total in Esplanade. We know that not every road in Esplanade is going to need under drain piping, but we do think there will be some that will probably need it. So if you take the $420,000 per mile estimate that we have, and we say we have over $2 million, $2.1 million, we've probably have enough to do another, over 5 miles of roads out of the 6.5 miles we didn't do. So the board and everybody that was involved in this process feels very comfortable with the money that we're going to have available to us for roads. And it's not like we're going to go out tomorrow and decide we're going to go do another 2 miles of roads. These roads will be done as they fail, as they're needed. We may not need to redo a road for a year. We may not need to redo another road for 2 years or 3 years. Whenever that time comes, the money will be available for that road repair. And my last comment on that slide is really the board feels that we're well positioned going forward with road money. Very comfortable. Some other infrastructure items, because since this is a full infrastructure update and not just the part that has to do with the Taylor Morrison settlement, there's a new gate protocol in place. It's being worked on and being implemented. In fact, we just had a meeting with Tessa and the infrastructure group today on this, so that you're going to see some information and some changes coming on that. And what I want to talk about that is an interim gate protocol that we are going to use now. The plan long term is for us to put a better, more robust gate system in that gives us better access control for the community and is much more automated than what we have now. We have a quote from Envira Systems. Part of that meeting today with Tessa and the infrastructure group was with Allied. What is Allied? What's the Tessa? I'm sorry. It's Allied what? Allied Universal. Allied Universal, I'm sorry. It left my mind for a second. Allied Universal just won the contract for Lakewood Ranch Country Club. They took over automation of their gates. So we're going to give them an opportunity to come in and look at what we have and let them give us a bid, so we'll have a good competitive bid against Envira. And that is something that we'll be talking about doing during the 2021 budget cycle with the community. One big thing that I'm really happy to see, and I hope Tessa is too, is the implementation of the infrastructure and the ARC groups working together. One of the things that I've seen since last year, since I got on the original OTG group, was that as good a job as the ARC group did, sometimes on some lot modifications and things like that, there may be some questions that weren't asked as part of the application process that had to do with drainage and how slopage and how water runoff was going to be affected, not only for the people living on their lot, but for the neighbors on each side of them. So what we have now is a lot of the ARC applications that come in and have to do with lot modifications. Before Tessa takes those to an ARC meeting, what we want to have happen is the infrastructure group goes out and does a survey on these ahead of time and says, yeah, this is good. What the resident is describing and that they're going to install is okay, or no, we're going to create some problems with this. We suggest the installation go this way. So it arms the ARC group with a little better information going into their meeting for application approval of the ARC request. And they're also helping Tessa clean up the backlog in the system that she was handed from our prior management company, which was significant. Yeah. So those are all getting cleaned up. So there are a lot of people out there that had deposit money in the system since last year. that hadn't received deposits back, that is all getting cleaned up also. So they're doing a very good job with that. One of the documents, a really fantastic document that was written by John Saganowitz, that'll be coming out for resident view. We're going to put it on the LWR site, and Tessa will have a note going out on that hopefully within the next week or so. But it is a Lakewood Esplanade Golf and Country Club at Lakewood Ranch stormwater system report, and it's basically an educational document. It talks all about our runoff system, the flow of waters through our site into our ponds, away from our site, how it's managed, the ponds. It's just a fantastic document. So when you see the note come out for this, I emphasize and hope everybody takes the time to go out and read it. It's really, really a good document and gives everybody an understanding of how important the pond system is to Esplanade in general. Another thing that's being done now as we speak, the bollards around the community were installed, I don't know, a long time ago. They were installed with an older version of lights. We are switching them over to a newer style bulb, which is actually a lower energy consumer, but a much higher output bulb. So you're going to see brighter bollards as you go around the community over the next few months. Eric's ordered all the bulbs. We found a vendor up in Tampa that actually gives a lifetime warranty on bulbs. So we'll install them, and if 5 years from now they go dead, you get a free replacement bulb. And I can attest to this because I've used this company for years on all my landscaping installations on my houses. And I have houses that I've sold people to 10 years ago that have called me and said bulbs have gone out. I send them right up to Volt, and Volt replaces the bulbs, no questions asked. So a very good company to deal with, and be a nice light upgrade for our bollard system. And that's pretty much all I have to say, except once again, I want to acknowledge the infrastructure group for all the work they've done over the past year. Tremendous amount of knowledge, tremendous amount of willingness to help the community, and I want to thank them here in front of everybody. They've really done a great job for the community. Thanks.
Okay, with that, we're going to have Tessa read the questions or comments.
All right, thank you so much. All right, so the first question that we had was, what is the cost of drainage and road repair? I think you may have addressed the road, but do we have a number on the drainage?
No, we don't. It's still being worked. The cost of that is still being worked, and we're probably going to do it in phases. I know Alan has been working with the landscape group and Eric to come up with a plan, and they're in the middle of doing that. But we don't have a final number on that we're willing to talk about today.
Okay, thank you. Question came in whether or not the members will be able to see the infrastructure figures, the numbers that were attributed to the line items, how you got to the total figure.
Well, we do have working documents that included costs, and those would be, I guess they're going to make available, correct?
I would wait until we have an agreement.
No, if there's agreement, if there's an agreement.
After the agreement's signed, those become part of the official records of the association.
Our council says once we approve and have a vote on the agreement, those documents become, and the developer signs off, and those documents are part of the corporate documents of this association, which would be available to our members.
Steve, I think what I can say
Go ahead.
is that the final list that we had, which were truly what would be considered alleged construction defects, let's use the right term, it parallels the settlement amount we got from Taylor Morrison.
I think that's fair, and that's how we came up with the figures, because, and I think some of the figures are a little conservative, and there's probably going to be savings and availability for some of that money to be used at other repair work that we would consider as alleged construction defect. But the total amount that we settled for mirrors what the estimates that were put together.
And so along those same lines, another question had come in that do the experts and or the board believe that the 1.3 million is sufficient to cover the costs of the needed repairs?
Yes.
Okay. Another question here, what did we pay Tannenbaum Scrow in legal fees?
We paid Tannenbaum Scrow for the hourly bills they submitted. And their rate of what we pay hourly is proprietary to them. Okay, so I can look back up with the total amount, and if they want to do that at the next board meeting, I'll go look up and say what was the total amount.
And will those monies come out of the settlement, or is those monies that have come out of the operating?
Those monies have already been paid out of the operating accounts because that's a legal consultation that we did for ourselves. And I think that's what Stephen was pointing it out, that if we went any other approach, our spending for experts would have been significant in doing that. Okay.
I could comment that the amounts that we paid for Tannenbaum Scrow were minimal in comparison to what we could have had, and the benefit of having Tannenbaum Scrow being associated or retained by us was one of the reasons that Taylor Morrison became a little bit more, let's say, interested in settlement negotiations, because Tannenbaum Scrow has a very strong reputation, and that was to our benefit.
And was there a total estimated cost that the board came up with for the defect repairs that were identified? Was there a number that you were working with?
As we said before, they mirror the settlement amount. As to what in individual items, that'll be part of the documents if and when we make them part of the corporate the documents.
And Steve, I would just add to that as well that that's one of the reasons why we didn't accept the first initial offer from Taylor Morrison, because we didn't feel it was sufficient to cover what we needed to do in terms of the repairs.
Which is a great segue into the next question of what was the initial Taylor Morrison offer?
Not sufficient enough to cover that.
Clearly. Okay, let's see. Is there a condition on when Taylor Morrison, excuse me, will complete the 2 condo buildings on Messina, and how does this impact the asphalt completion on Messina?
I could respond to that. I had a conversation with some people at Taylor Morrison. I said, how come you're not completing the other 2 condos? And what they told me is they used sales are down because of the COVID situation. And more specifically, because I pressed them, I said, well, that's not really that good of an answer. So what's happened is that they have 16 unsold units in the 2 buildings that just came on board, meaning that they're available to occupy. And when those 16 units are sold, they will then start construction on the last 2 condo buildings. And they indicated they have every intention of putting those 2 condo buildings up at the point where the others are sold. That's why they wanted a 12-month. They negotiated for 12 months for Messina Loop, is because of it's going to probably get into next year before those buildings are completed. But that's that's their intention.
Steve, can I add some exact?
Sure, go right ahead.
I think if you take a look at Taylor Morrison's, because they do provide us the closed home numbers every month. It was a shock to them, it was a shock to us. It was very good numbers. As I showed before in number of slides, they were ahead of the curve in the first 3 months of the year. Then April and May, they hit a rock bottom. They closed only 1 unit in April, 1 unit in May. So that's when they said, we're going to put a hold on additional construction, because they didn't know how long this is going to hold. The good news is, June, they bounced up to 8 units closed. July, 6 units closed. So if this continues,
Good trend.
the trend continues as where it is in the 6 to 8 level every month, I don't see why they won't complete the other 2 buildings pretty quickly.
A couple of items here that I believe were already addressed, but just to restate in case anybody missed it, the settlement will be final once all parties have signed it and it's been returned. So that's the simple answer to that. And I believe I also saw, Dick, when you were presenting that the amenity center floor replacement is part of these monies. Is that correct?
Yeah, and it's kind of a, I know, I'm sorry. The simple answer is yes. There actually are some things that we have reserve money available for. So a perfect example was the pool equipment. Even though from a preventative maintenance standpoint it wasn't taken care of and needed replaced, we actually had a pool of money already available to us to do that. So there's some of these things, especially the smaller projects, that we may use our reserve funds for. And if we don't have reserve funds available, we use it. All that'll do is leave some more money in the pot here to fix other defects that we have that come up.
Sure, fair enough. Thank you.
Just so that everybody understands.
Absolutely.
I think it's very critical to understand that these funds will be used to fix construction defects as we sign the agreement on. That's the first thing. Second thing is, for purposes of tax minimization and all that, all these funds will be utilized as capitalized projects. That way we don't have to pay any taxation on that. So we will use those 2 criteria in the way. If there's a key project that doesn't fall under these 2, as Dick said, we'll probably look at the reserve category, and if it's not there, we have to go into the operating category. I mean, these are the kind of criteria we'll start to follow. But these funds, those 2 are very critical that we'll use them for construction defects to be in line with the agreement we sign, and then to minimize taxes, we'll use them as capitalized funds.
And that's another good segue, because another one of the questions here in terms of spending money on the roads is whether or not that was going to be done as soon as possible, or if there was going to be maybe a holding or waiting period on that. And that if you wait, what are the tax implications of that, and do we know that?
That's a great question. Let's not please talk what tax strategies we use publicly, okay? Especially not in a board meeting, please, okay? If people want to talk tax strategies, we'll have one-on-one conversations. Alan, is an auditor by his prior life, so he has some understanding. We're having conversations with our accounting firms in understanding what we're going to do. I would like to leave it here not to talk tax strategies openly in the board meeting. But I will commit to this, between Alan and I, we're going to do everything that we can physically and legally and by complying with the regulations be in to minimize tax payments.
Perfect, thank you. We have a question of, are the grounds around the wellness pool, particularly the golf cart area that they're now driving on, going to be fixed?
We hope.
Okay, all right.
There is, I don't have the mic. Tell them there is a plan to do
So there is a
Yes.
plan to do
We
that.
do.
a plan
have a
for it,
proposal.
and
Yeah, we do have a proposal to repair that area. There's also a drainage issue there that they're looking to repair. So yes,
Okay.
it's underway.
Wonderful. And then we have just a couple of more here. In terms of the second lift for some of the roads, will that be funded by Taylor Morrison? Is separate from this settlement?
It'll be
Yes.
funded by Taylor Morrison. That's their commitment for all the roads that they dug up to do underground drainage. They will finish the second under their own funding.
Okay, so
That's
anything that
rough-
requires a final lift will get done by,
Which one?
anything that requires a final or
Final
second
lift
lift.
would be all theirs, please.
Wonderful. And 2 more questions, or maybe 3 here. So what is the process, or what's the process, has the board talked about, going to be for handling the correction of these defects?
What was that
And
question again?
what will the process be for handling these defects? Maybe just kind of the
You mean
order
the-
of
you
how
mean the,
things are going to be
uh,
done or evaluated?
The project management part of making sure these get done.
Yes.
That would be we're looking to Icon to be the project manager for all of these because that's what you do.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Okay.
As I said, one is the project management side, then where the funding will come from is a whole different kind of a thing as I talked about. Just want to make sure we keep those two kind of matched
So-
up in the process.
Yes.
So Chris is correct. We fund it, you build it.
Sounds fair. We'll do that. The last question here, well, actually, excuse me, two. And I think we've kind of talked about this. There's probably not a straight answer to this because it sounds like you're still evaluating it. But the question was, how will drainage and pond bank caves be addressed? Sounds like we're still in the evaluation stage of that.
They're talking about some of the pond banks.
Pond banks
That were
and,
worked
and
last year.
drainage in general.
We know there's still some issues there. They're not as broad as they were last year when we started working on them, but they're part of the list and they will get taken care of. I can't tell them when, but it will be done.
Okay, wonderful. And then I think we had one question here, probably does not necessarily apply to this evening, but just to respond to the member who asked it. Question on the PPP monies and were we successful? Sounds like maybe we'll be talking about that at the next board meeting.
Please be patient. I will address it at the Monday board meeting along with a lot of other financial topics, please. And PPP is one of them that we'll address it so that everybody is aware of where we are.
Tessa, you'll be sending out the agenda for Monday's meeting. And as Chris says, the majority of it will be focused on financials, where we are year to date, PPP. So all of those items are scheduled for Monday's board meeting.
Correct, and that agenda is scheduled to go out tomorrow.
Perfect.
Okay, well, I think that covers all of the questions that we've had submitted. Unless there's a couple other stragglers, if anybody's thought of anything, I think we have a couple of items to address here, and then we'll go from there.
Before I go into the motion, I know Dick has already said it, but I think someone other than the guy that was in charge of the group has to say it. The infrastructure group did a tremendous job on all of these alleged construction defects. I just want to say that from this side, that they did a heck of a job, and I'm sure Dick told him the same thing Steve told us when we during the board. Hey, it's only going to take 20 hours a month or something like that. And I know these guys were out there almost on a daily basis working all of these issues. And I'm just extremely, and I hope I'm not saying anything out of line, but I think the whole board is extremely cognizant of that and extremely glad that these guys took this on. And now I will go to the motion.
Well, wait a minute. Now that we do we have any other open discussion before we move forward? If no further open discussion, just general open discussion, then I will entertain any motion.
I move that we accept and sign the Taylor Morrison settlement agreement with all conditions as written in the agreement. I also state that the settlement funds of $1,291,937 to be used only for the repair of alleged construction defects as stated in the settlement, and for any future unknown alleged construction deficiency that may be found and take priority over current alleged repairs. The HOA deficit funding of $568,063 to be used in any manner decided by the Board of Directors within their responsibilities and the Esplanade declarations as the Esplanade Board of Directors as stated in the settlement. The board sought council approval of this agreement, which was received from council. That's the motion. That is the motion.
We have a second. Any discussion? If no further discussion, let's vote. All in favor of the motion, signify aye. Aye. Motion carries.
Thank you. Our next item of business this evening is the unfinished business from our June meeting, which was to review the Culinary Center acoustic proposal. Dick, are you going to lead that? Thank you.
Thanks, Tessa. Everybody thought the fun was over with the vote. We got one more section to do here. I want to give everybody an update on the acoustical project because it's such a big issue for the community, and it's one of the high-level items off of our deficiency list. I talked at a prior meeting about how we wanted to approach the project in phases. That hasn't changed. The good news is that, and I'll get into it on some previous slides, we've gone back to Acousti, and we've gone back and forth and worked the plan several times, and we've gotten it to where we think we want it. We have the contract language where we want it, so we're basically down to the board reviewing the final draft of the contract and getting this thing signed and moved on. But the project phases haven't changed. Phase 1 will start with the bar area and the dining area. Phase 2 is the main dining area. The private dining area in the back is 3. 4 is the wine room, the teaching kitchen. 5 are all the hallway areas, and 6 is the main entry area. Go to the next slide, Krish. I want to talk a little bit about Phase 1 process because it'll be slightly different than the rest. Phase 1 is the bar and the bar dining area. Once this area is completed, we are going to bring in ED&A, Edward Duggar and Associates, back in to do another sound study just to make sure that we are getting the results that we expect from the work. Pretty much do a sanity check before we cut them loose on additional phases. One of the changes that we did, and I want to thank some of our residents here who brought up a concern, and Krish did some work on this behind the scenes and helped me understand what they were actually talking about. They had some good points. We adjusted the square footage of installation for the project to be in line with the sound study projections. We were basically doing more in some of the areas than we had to do, and it was driving the cost up. So we've brought the square footage in line with the sound study projections. Now, with that said, we didn't want to cut it to the point where it made the aesthetics of the job look not like it's supposed to, basically. We wanted it to look nice when it was done. So we looked at where we could cut square footage and not affect the aesthetics, and we pretty much reached agreement with Acousti Inc. on that because, frankly, they weren't interested in doing the job if we were going to cut it too far. They didn't want to have their name tied to a project that they didn't think was going to turn out well. So at the end of the day, we got good collaboration with them, and we were able to adjust a lot of the square footages back to where we think we'll get hopefully maximum results. And the way we have the contract set up is the board will approve each phase. Basically, as we go through the project and we go from phase 1 to phase 2, there'll be a board approval process. From phase 2 to 3, there'll be an approval process. And it has to do, each phase is actually priced out separately in the contract too. So we're required to have 50% down for the contract for each phase. We're not going to put 50% down for the whole project. 50% down will be for each phase of the project as it's approved to move forward. The next phase, or the next slide, Krish. These are the prices for the different phases. A little over $60,000 for the bar and dining room area, a little over $63,000 for the main dining area, and you can see the list here if you're viewing the slide. Those two areas, the main dining and the bar area, are the two biggest areas, and they're really the two areas that are probably used the majority of the time, but they also had the biggest cost with them. Moving on to the next slide. The total cost for the project, including all phases, is $247,320. If you remember from the last board meeting where I did the original presentation, it was right at $270,000. The 247 now represents the deduction in square footage of application that we were using with some of the materials. The board feels, and I feel strongly, and I think most people do, that phases 1 through 4 are pretty much a must-do for us. And those are the areas where people congregate all the time when the culinary center is in full use. Phases 5 and 6, the hallways and the main entryway, they're more pass-through areas, and they're not areas where we need to really spend a lot of money, maybe on acoustics. So if we only do the first 4 phases that we consider critical for the culinary center, it drops the cost of the project down to a little over $176,000. So that's really what we're looking. I don't think any of us at this point think we'll do more than 4 phases, but we'll see as we go along. And everything will be evaluated, and it'll all be presented to the residents as we go along. So that's where we're at right now with the update. Like I said, we're pretty much ready to sign a contract. Acousti is pretty much waiting for us to sign the contract so they can get us on their schedule. There's not a whole lot of companies around that do this type of work, and they're very busy. So we want to get the contract signed. They will not put us on schedule until we get this contract signed. And right now we're probably at least a month or 2 out. The goal would be for us to try to have at least the first 3 to 4 areas done before we get back into peak season. So it's real critical that we move forward as quickly as we can on this. Thank you.
Okay, a lot of work has been done in regards to this acoustic contract. A lot of people have been involved in it, both board members, infrastructure group, residents who have a lot of knowledge about this. And in regards to getting the competitive bids on this, it's very limited because there's not that many people that do exactly this. And I think we've done a wonderful job, not me personally, but the folks that are involved to get to a pricing and a cadence based on actual results. And I think that's the very important thing in this whole operation. So I think this is the way I know this is the way we're going to go. And this is one of our projects that we're going to do with the funds that we are going to receive for alleged construction defect repairs. Can't say that enough. The counselor sitting right here. You know, before we adjourn, just want to say that there's been over 100 people involved in various phases of where we are today. I mean, we've come a long way. There was a general liaison group several years ago. Went to an OTG group a couple of years ago. Now we have a board. We've taken over. We've made some big decisions. Have we made all of them perfectly? I don't think so. We could always improve. We're always trying to improve. You have to understand our mission is to protect the home values of this community while enhancing the value of our members and the experience here. We haven't mentioned Icon too much this evening because we've had other things we had to talk about. I just want to mention that Icon is now 2 months in. Our new general manager, Bobby Barnes is right here. He's not speaking tonight. I won't put him on the spot. I could, but I won't. I will say that Icon is working hard to kind of pick up the pieces. The prior management group at the last, as I mentioned, it took 90 days for them to get here. And at that time, there's some things that needed to be cleaned up. They're trying to develop their culture, which is their iconic culture. And we're going to hear a lot more about that. They're going to have a town hall to give a performance review of what they've seen so far, what they have done, and what they're going to do over the next near term, and then maybe talk a little bit about the next year. We're very excited about them. I think you've seen some things that they have done. There's a lot more to do. I think that this community is moving forward. Again, the greatness of the community is the people. I think everybody here really likes living here, gets along, and we want to continue that. And unless anybody has anything else this evening, oh wait, Alan does.
Me.
Did I? Oh no. Oh.
So to
Trust
back
me.
up a little bit, I'd like to make a motion that we accept the acoustic contract as we have it.
I'll second that motion.
Any further discussion about the acoustic contract? If no questions, wait, we have a question.
No, there's no questions on the screen.
What are we
or here.
approving, or are we just saying we're accepting the contract? I'm just trying to understand. So that means we had to have a board motion.
He
Okay,
just
so
did.
what's the motion?
That we accept the contract as written.
You can only even proceed on this only after the agreement is signed with TM. So there needs to be a condition.
So I would suggest that the motion be made contingent on the agreement and funding from TM.
And funding from TM, and you're approving phase one, as Dick has said. So I think that needs to be clear. Funding from TM, you're only approving phase one.
Before you vote, there is one question that popped up. I don't know if you want to hear the comment or
Sure.
question that has come up. The statement here says, investing $176,000, which is approximately 14% of the entire settlement, to address noise in the culinary center to a reasonable level. Hard estimate on all top items in the deficiency list before settlement funds are dispersed. I'm not really sure what that.
I'm not sure we understand the question.
Hard estimate on all top items in the deficiency list before a settlement funds are dispersed?
I think what he's saying, if he were to take our top 5 or top 10, have some numbers associated with them to see what impact this may have compared to some others. I think that's what the question's coming from.
I think my suggestion to the motion is that contingent that we approve only phase one of it, which is kind of roughly about 60,000. Let's see the results, as Dick has suggested, and then we can approve other things, depending on what the results look like. So it's all you're approving right now is the first phase. I don't remember the exact number, Dick. I think you're $61,000, really.
And I presume that we hold on to that contract and don't disperse it to the vendor until the settlement has been agreed upon? Yes. Okay. Thank you.
All right, so let's get back to some formalization of this proposal or this motion to include the items that were just mentioned. Can you restate that, or would you like somebody else to restate that?
I want to make a motion that we accept phase one of the contract, subject to receiving the funds from Taylor Morrison.
Do we have a second? Any discussion? All right, let's vote. All those in favor? Aye. Motion approved.
As a matter of just inquiry, somebody has just asked if somebody can describe what the panels will look like for the acoustic controls.
We actually have some pictures of the product. I think it might be, instead of me standing here trying to describe it, we might, once we get the Taylor Morrison funds and we actually start moving forward, we can actually put some pictures out on the LWR side of what the finished product actually looks like. But it's basically a 1-inch panel that overlays on ceilings and walls. And the colors, everything will blend right into the culinary center. It doesn't really affect the aesthetics of the building at all. It looks fantastic.
Dick, I don't know how big the interest is. A suggestion is ask Acoustic to put a small piece with the cover in the hallway or in the entrance area of the thing, because they can put a small piece up there so people, when they walk in, can look at what the panel looks like actually.
That's great. That's great.
Okay.
Well, I think you should do that speech that you did a few minutes ago all over again.
You know, I kind of, I was on a roll for that speech.
I mean, you were. That was really,
And-
really eloquent.
No, and I apologize for skipping the important part of the vote, and that's my bad, and it's another unforced error, but I will learn from it. But we have another person that would like to speak before we adjourn.
No, I was just going to add to the comments around the acoustic work that's going to be done in the Culinary Center. I don't want to steal anyone's thunder, but you're going to hear soon from the Strategic Planning Group, and you'll see that that was one of the biggest items that came back, that people were really dissatisfied with the acoustics and the ambiance in the Culinary Center. So stay tuned, coming very soon to our next board meeting.
And also, we really recommend you'll get the agenda for Monday's meeting, but a good portion of that meeting, besides Krish and all the numbers that he's going to be talking about, is the strategic planning group that's going to share the results of this survey that was very well received, and a lot of people. I'm not going to say anything. I'll just say that a lot of people participated in that, and there are some interesting results that kind of dovetail with what's happening here. I'm going to turn it back over to Sandy because she has an acknowledgement for somebody.
Just to add to Steve's comments and the iconic service that we've been receiving so far, I just want to acknowledge Mickey Subotic. We've received an overwhelming number of comments regarding the condition of the golf course, and the improvements that he has made in such a short period of time is absolutely phenomenal and amazing, which hiring Icon was worth it just to get Mickey. No offense.
None taken.
There are plenty of people at Icon that's going to give us iconic service, and you're going to hear that term a lot as they get through their first phase of just onboarding themselves and making sure they have the folks going in the right direction. And we're very happy with that. And with that, unless there is something else,
Steve, I just would like to just say one thing. I know that this job that you all do can be a thankless job. So I just wanted to share with you some of the positive comments that came through on tonight's feed, just so that you know it's not always just somebody venting to you. So there was a thank you for a great presentation. So impressed with everything you've done. Kudos to the board and great job, board. So just wanted to share that with you as well.
that's a good way to end.
It is.
So with that, I would look for a motion to adjourn.
Before I make the motion to adjourn, I just want to say happy anniversary, Steve and Linda.
It was yesterday.
Yesterday.
I'm in big trouble.
Anyways, I make a motion we adjourn this meeting.
Any discussion? No discussion. Meeting adjourned. See you on Monday. Have a great weekend.